The following is a Live the Dream Media production.
Hello and welcome to the Faith Family Schools podcast with your host Christopher DeSimone.
All right, my friends, welcome back to the latest episode of Faith Family Schools. Remember, you can check out all of our goodness at faithfamilyschools.com. That is your road to Instagram, Facebook, YouTubes, and all of that good stuff where we talk about America's road back. And, you know, we have a lot of great guests, but also there's some times where I just want a little me time, a little together time to talk about some of the dynamics, human nature. It all comes back to human nature, but then also it's kind of the dynamics that build up over time in structures and governments. And I wanted to talk about two things today real quick. One is the sin of indifference, and then we're going to get to a big word like delicatessen, as my old English teacher would say. It's a phrase called the tragedy of commons, and we'll get to that. But St. Maximilian Kolbe, who actually died in the death camps of Nazi Germany, once said the most deadly poison of our time is indifference. And I think what happens is, I've seen it we live in Tucson, Arizona. It's a liberal petri dish for most of the bad ideas that you see nationally. We got it all here. But what I've learned is that we get to a point where we keep saying we're busy. And yes, we're busy. Kids, family, running a business, working at our job, coaching soccer, that's all good stuff. But what happens is there's our people in this world who are counting on you to be busy, so busy that you don't pay attention. And so when you see dropping voter participation, even in Tucson recently, we have a mayor that just got reelected who thinks she has a mandate from the masses, where it looks like 10 or 11% of registered voters actually voted for her. So we're quote busy, that indifference that we have. There's busy, and then there's when does busy really become I'm indifferent? And part of it is, again, over 50 years, a good portion of our brothers and sisters were raised by parents who were indifferent. And there are forces in this world, my friends, that are either politically, through your universities, colleges, or even your churches, who are counting on you to be busy. And that's when these kind of things, the bad things, that this slippery slope we've been on for 50 years happen because a lot of this are, quote, busy. So when we talk about indifference and what we can do, there just has to come a time where you, my good friends out there, you have to start carving out some of your time. And you're going to say, well, I don't want to take time away from my kids or my spouse or whatever. That's fine. But you can't complain about what's going on in the world. Now, a blessing, a silver lining in the cloud of COVID was a chunk of you started to wake up a little bit. Some of you that have never gone to a meeting in your life were all of a sudden going to city council meetings, board of supervisors for county, or school board meetings because you finally figured out that these people have a control over your life that at times can be quite negative on the existence of you and your family or your business. So all of a sudden I'm seeing, and this is something I preached on my radio show, Wake Up Tucson, KVOI.com, for you people in the national world. We always said, go to a meeting, go to your, whatever town or county you live in, go once a quarter and just sit there for an hour, just pay attention. Go experience what we call a consent agenda, especially in municipalities like towns or cities, where on one vote they put contracts on there that they say, oh, they're so boring that we don't really need to talk about them. But you start adding up some of the contracts, and like in one thing they pass so many contracts for, I don't know, $26 million. You're like, dude, where's our money? But during the COVID lockdown problem period, you guys woke up. You got moms and dads going after school boards at the call to the audience, And they found out a lot of these people, some of them were happy that you were out there participating. A lot of them were like, why are the peons talking to us? Why would they talk to us like that? We're the blank Valley School Board. Why would they talk to us like that? So that was encouraging. If there's a silver lining in what happened during COVID lockdowns, is a bunch of human beings, especially moms and dads with kids in school, woke up. But the question is, are you going back to sleep? That's the other problem here. So here we are. Gas is still ridiculous. I know there's some people like, oh, thank God it's $2.93 a gallon. Well, it was $1.83 a gallon literally 3.5 years ago. You're like, oh, thank God it's $2.93. As Colonel Potter said in MASH, horse hockey. A friend of mine went to a local place to get 3 burritos for dinner last night. To go, it was $54 out the door for 3 burritos. So I'm afraid, I don't know if you guys are going to fall asleep during this whole inflation thing. A very good friend of mine, David Schweikert, who's the head of he's on the Ways and Means Committee, amazing data wonk. The latest data coming out of the Ways and Means Committee in Congress is it's now costing the average family $13,992 more to live than it did a year ago or a couple of years ago because the price of everything's so expensive. So I'm a little afraid that you guys and girls might fall back asleep. Don't do it. Please don't do it. Because they're counting on you, the people in power, especially when we come up to the 2024 elections, the school board people who are, and there's a bunch of them who are up that are, maybe they just got elected during COVID and they did lockdowns and vax mandates and all those silly things that you thought were bad. Well, they might be coming up for re-election and you need to pay attention. You got to pay attention. One thing on indifference, and this is something I've written about before in a local paper here called Inside Tucson Business. It's those of us who actually serve on boards. Could be a school board. It could be a nonprofit board. But when you're on some of these nonprofit boards that say they're going to advocate for blank, teachers, small business, all of these things, you actually have to do your job. Sometimes the people, it's a double-edged sword. Like when you're asked by the executive director of an organization to be on their board, really pay attention. Are they asking you to be on the board because they think you have deep knowledge and experience and insight that's going to help take this organization to another level? Or do they think you're going to be someone who doesn't actually ask questions? Are they putting you on the board because, you know something? They think you're not going to be a troublemaker. You're going to be a rubber stamp vote. And you know something? There's a lot of organizations that are not doing the best they can with donor dollars. If you think there's politicians not doing the best with taxpayer dollars, there's a plenty of nonprofits, and some of you serve on them, that are not doing the best with the donor dollars. So pay attention. Ask questions. I like that if you're going to be involved, I love that I just said you gotta carve out part of your day to make things better out there. Well, good. When you get there, ask the right questions. Read and research. Know what you're doing when you get there. And what's really funny about a lot of these boards, some of them have, some of these organizations have budgets in the millions, is if you're going to be on the board, one of the reasons they get tax-exempt status is because the board is supposed to have a fiduciary, as they say in my bad Brooklyn accent, the fiduciary responsibility to do the right thing and watch out for the assets and resources of the organization like it's your money. And if you don't do that, there can be consequences for not doing that. So pay attention, my friends. If you're going to step up and participate, really participate. And watch out. I'm telling you, they could be picking you because you don't ask questions. Hold on, I have to get a sip of my very unprofessional here on our podcast. I want to talk about the tragedy of commons real quick. And this is something that a listener, actually a guy who's a fine radio show host in Tucson, Charles Heller, does a lot of pro-Second Amendment, and one of the more knowledgeable constitutional gentlemen in Arizona. He listens to our show called Wake Up Tucson, and he brought up the term was called the tragedy of the commons. And it was brought up in 1974 by a guy named Garrett Hardin in Science magazine. You know, I know all you guys are out there and looking for how to build your own homemade laser in Science magazine, and this guy's talking about tragedy of the commons. But so it was the idea that the tragedy of the commons. Let me go to the Harvard Business School. We'll go for the fancy definition. Refers to a situation in which individuals with access to public resources, also called the common or are common, act in their own interest, and in doing so ultimately deplete the resource. So in that way, it was done in an environmental economic sense. But let's get to the human nature side of this. The tragedy of the commons refers to a situation in which individuals act in their own interest instead of the common good. That's where I have translated the tragedy of commons, and others have, to 2023. And so there's a wonderful, simple Latin term, cui bono, who benefits. So when you look at what's going on at your university, your high school, your school district, your local government, right? Or your churches, you're saying, who's benefiting in this situation? And is it really the people who are truly benefiting it? Are they the people that are supposed to be benefiting it? Because what you're going to notice is if you're a city or a town or a school district, you're going to say, well, it's got to be everyone in there, right? What are we doing, as we say in one of my favorite comedy movies, Hot Fuzz, the greater good, right? In relation to the greater good, are we really doing that? Because what I've noticed, especially in southern Arizona in local government, the people who really benefit seem to be the people who have developed that relationship to benefit with their relationship from power, and not the people who are us idiots that make up the, quote, common good. So what I've noticed, where we live here in Pima County, Arizona, it's like a banana republic sometimes on how things get done business-wise. So I have politicians who say, we're run by Democrats, both the county of Pima and the city of Tucson, who say they're advocates for the working poor. They're advocates for women. They're advocates for Hispanics, Latinos. We don't say Latinx around here. They say this is our constituent. This is who really relies upon us. But when you look closer, the people who are suffering, working poor, Hispanics, women, right? And what happens is the people who say they're the leaders in this community, or your community, who say they advocate for these things, pay attention. What you're going to learn is they kiss the rear end of power because they get a deal, right? If you're in the real estate world, you develop real estate, you build buildings, whatever you're doing, in most of the time, you're going to want to be friends with local power because you want to get your deals done. You want to get your rezones done in a timely manner. But what happens is there's two tiers of justice. There's two tiers of getting things done in your community. There's the ones who know how to manipulate with power and how they either hire the right lawyer who knows everybody, who's kind of the approved lawyer for your land deal, or you're a nonprofit who gets some sort of money crumbs from the taxpayer dollars that these elected officials put out there. So you have to watch out when you go through this process that this tragedy of the commons is the idea that people who say they're leaders in your communities, what is going on? Because I've seen local chambers of commerce in the Tucson region who kiss the rear end and don't fight the power that crushes small business in this town. And when I talk to their board members, they say, but we have access. We have access to the mayor and council, even though they treat all of our business owners like crap. Well, at that point, it's like getting access. I get free access to someone who punches me in the groin every day. Before I had to pay, but now I get free access, and I walk up and this lady has brass knuckles on and punches me in the groin, but we have access. It's human nature is a hell of a thing, my friends. So when you look at yourselves, right, if you're one of those people who really want the best to be done for everyone, pay attention and ask the question, who's benefiting in your community, right? When you look at your school district, so Tucson is a origin spot for lots of bad ideas. Tucson Unified School District, it's one of the worst school districts in the state of Arizona. It's also the largest. Well, who benefits? Well, for years, TUSD, Tucson Unified School District, had some of the most highest paid administrators in Tucson, right? And so I remember there was a guy who used to be a board member, Mark Stegman, and he was a economics professor. He still is at the University of Arizona. And he was doing an analysis of, this is like post-08, right? Post-08 crash, money's kind of thinner than it used to be. And he did an analysis of where the money was going. And so there was a decrease of money going into the classroom, like less than 50 cents per dollar of spending was going into an actual classroom. But somehow during this decrease of classroom spending, their administration costs went up 17%. So I had lots of people making 6-digit salaries in a town in Tucson that the per capita income is, I don't know, just south of $25,000. So pay attention about your people who are not just in power, but the people who support the power, right? These are the people who go, why don't they step up and say this is wrong? Why don't they step up and support challengers in elections, right? Because that's the other thing, right? I've seen it in the business community in Southern Arizona. They would go, I wish we could get someone to run for office, a good business person, right? But then what happens is someone steps up and they go, oh, hold on. If you win, you're going to screw up our deal with the county or the city. So my friend Joe Higgins, who's been on a couple of shows here, he's my gentleman who built the Lehman Academy schools, and he's really jumped into the academic freedom movement over the years. But Joe is an amazing business owner, and he was a small business guy. He's owned the cell phone store that he knew he was smart enough to get out of it when they knew the companies were going to come in and have their own. He's done Sports Buzz haircuts, a garbage business. He's the ultimate entrepreneur. So when he finally said, well, I'm going to run for office, everyone's like, yay, what are you going to run for? Dog catcher? He goes, well, no, I'm going to run against a sitting incumbent. This lady named Ann Day. She died in the last few years, rest her soul. But, Ann was part of I can get my deals done. If Joe comes in there and he starts acting like kind of a guy who wants to do the greater good, you're going to screw up my deal. So it's just something to watch for. Always ask again, cui bono, who benefits? And some of you watching this, you might be part of the problem. You might be the one benefiting while the rest of that population suffers. So in retrospect today, indifference is the biggest poison in humanity in the end. How many people, when these big, horrible things happen in the world, how many people just sit around? I think Pink Floyd said in Momentary Lapse of Reason album, it's just not enough to stand and stare anymore, guys. It's not enough to just stand and stare. That's from On the Turning Away. I just want to give David Gilmour his props. And we're standing and staring a lot. And the problem is we're standing and staring with our stupid phones. In the old days, we used to kind of maybe do the 1,000-mile stare, just like spacing out, dude. But now you get distracted with your stupid phone. You're watching the Kardashians while you drive 70 miles an hour in a 45, right? And you're like, and then what happens is you have that moment of peace and quiet, and you go, hey, dude, what happened to my country? Well, you were there. You were there while all this happened. And I hope that we can get the message out more and more. And, listening to the angry MAGA pure people out there, I mean, I love their energy, but we have to reach out to those people who are those ones that are oblivious in the middle. A good friend of mine came up to me right before the 2022 election, and he said to me, Chris, my wife is one of the problems with the electorate. And I said, well, why is that? He goes, she gets all her political news from the Today Show, from Savannah Guthrie and Hoda, whatever her face name is. And so that's where we're at, my friends, is you have to get educated. And if you're watching Faith Family Schools, I mean, you're pretty much already there. You're paying attention enough. We just got to get the message. You have to preach to your circle. You have to torture them by sharing Faith Family and Schools with them and say, hey, listen to this idiot in Tucson and see if he makes any sense. Because that's the battle line is not going to be just like, we're going to win the Senate, bro. It's important. I'm not saying these things aren't important. But the battle for America's soul is going to be in your neighborhood. You sharing the ideas that maybe what's going on behind the curtain doesn't work anymore. Right? What are you doing to say, something? I've been watching some of these school board meetings. They're frightening as hell. Like I said, I keep talking about literacy. Go look it up. Most states have their schools. What percentage of kids are reading at level? Read it. You're going to look at it and go, what the hell just happened? So one of my favorite talks with our buddy Clint that day was, he said, I asked him, it was a soccer question. I apologize. I said, what percentage of TUSD kids can read, Tucson Unified School District? And he thought, well, I knew he thought I was suckering him. And he said, I don't know, 40%. Well, it's 16%. He thought he was shooting low. Go find out yourself. Seriously, if you're a grandparent, go talk to your kids. Ask your kids, have you looked at what's the reading level of the kids that my grandkids are going to school? Because most of the time you're going to be disappointed. If you see something over a 50, break out the bottle of Dom Perignon, my friends, because that's where we're at on reading levels. Like in Pima County, where we're at in southern Arizona, I was on the board of these Lehman Academies here. We have 4 or 5 of them in the area. We're at, 80-ish. And that's 80-ish, as Kramer once said, is dominating the dojo. A lot of these schools, Amphi School District, where I live, there's 14,000 kids in Amphi. They're at 35 to 40. Marana School District, they finally are getting it, but a couple of years ago, they were in the 40s. So I'm telling you, my friends, you got to influence your little personal circle. Very, very important. So again, indifference, no more. No more. Because the powers that be that are ruining your school, your town, your state, or your country are counting on you to be busy. I feel like it's simple and silly. You just have to you got to stop it. You got to pay attention. And whether you're doing it because you're like, oh, I got my little pot, I got like my little piece of the pie, I'm doing fine. Well, that's cute. But what are you doing? Right? A lot of us go to church. Are we paying attention to whatever faith we're talking about? Most of them say you should probably go out and take care of the poor and unsheltered. Are you doing any of that? I mean, it's something that I have to take. I do it with myself all the time. You have to take inventory of what you're doing because it's easy to get busy. I got it. My wife and I raised 2 kids. They're in their early 20s now. I coach soccer. I know how fast this goes. You're working. I do a radio show in the morning. I have a business with my brother. I got 2 practices a week. You got 3 tournaments on the weekend, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, damn, the kids are 18. But they're counting on that. They're counting on you to be busy. They're counting on you to be indifferent. And they are counting on you to be, I don't want to say, it's not greedy. That's not the word. It's really the idea that you're satisfied with your own little personal sphere, so everything outside the sphere can basically kiss your rear. We have to change that. And this has happened over, again, a 40, 50-year period. So, again, we're turning the big tanker. We're not turning a little speedboat. It's going to take time. All right, my friends, have an amazing day. Thank you for watching, listening to Faith Family Schools. and go to faithfamilyschools@gmail.com if you have any guest suggestions or you'd like Chris to just shut up. We do both. Nothing hurts our feelings here. But also, share it with those folks. Share it with those people. Again, if you're on Faith Family Schools, you're paying attention. But you know something? Can you share our podcast, our YouTube videos? Go share them with folks. Go share them with the people in your world that are indifferent or just lost. And they're lost in the media and watching Instagram posts of beavers eating carrots. I love beavers eating carrots. So hit the like button, and you guys have an amazing day and or evening whenever you're watching this. And thank you for watching Faith Family Schools, America's Road Back. Have a great day.